Camilla's absence wasn't just a scheduling conflict, it was a calculated omission. During a high-profile state ceremony at Windsor, the Queen Consort's traditional position was unexpectedly filled by Princess Anne. Without public explanation, the optics alone triggered a wave of speculation. Was this a health issue, a silent demotion, or something deeper? With Camilla's prolonged silence and reports of inner-circle purges, insiders began piecing together a different picture, one of quiet reconfiguration at the highest levels of the monarchy. And right at the center of it stood Anne, once a background figure, now stepping into a formal role as if you love getting the real story behind the palace walls. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Her Majesty's Delegate, a title loaded with meaning. What unfolded wasn't just ceremonial reshuffling. It was a recalibration of royal symbolism, a subtle, strategic shift away from inherited spotlight toward earned credibility. Princess Anne's emergence wasn't about grandeur or drama, but quiet authority and loyalty. In a monarchy navigating modern scrutiny and internal dissonance, her steady presence redefines what leadership looks like. This video examines a deeper motive behind Anne's rising influence, what it reveals about King Charles' strategy, and how figures like Catherine, William, and even Harry are silently shaping this new order. The moment Princess Anne stepped into Camilla's usual place at the Windsor state ceremony, jaws quietly dropped across the royal watching world. No public announcement, no dramatic fanfare, just a silent yet seismic switch that sent shockwaves through palace walls and across the Commonwealth. Anne, long known as a royal family's steely backbone, was suddenly front and center, and Camilla, the Queen Consort, was nowhere in sight. It was the kind of move that didn't need to be explained. Because the implications? Oh, they were loud enough on their own. Camilla has traditionally been a central figure in these ceremonies, her presence cemented as part of King Charles' vision for a modernized monarchy. But this time, that script got rewritten, publicly, strategically, and without so much as a whisper from the palace press office. Instead, Princess Anne was named Her Majesty's Delegate, a title that's not just ceremonial fluff. It's a formal recognition of authority. And it was delivered in the most calculated setting possible, a high-profile state event at Windsor. This wasn't just about someone filling in for a sick relative. This was a power move. The rumor started instantly. Where was Camilla? Why didn't she appear? Was it illness, a personal issue, or something far more political, maybe even a quiet, deliberate sidelining? Because this wasn't a minor event. This was one of those ceremonies, the kind that screams tradition and hierarchy in the public face of the crown. And it's not just who was missing that raised eyebrows, it's who replaced her. Princess Anne, the one royal who's kept her head down and her schedule full while others played media games or chased headlines. The one royal who's never courted the spotlight, but somehow ends up commanding it anyway. She didn't ask for this role. She was this role. The optics were crystal clear, and isn't a placeholder. She's a stabilizer. As the headlines started rolling, so did the speculation. Camilla's absence wasn't brushed off, it was dissected. Her name had been attached to every major appearance beside Charles since his coronation, and now, suddenly, nothing. And it wasn't just a one-off. Reports quickly surfaced of Camilla stepping back from other duties. 2. Palace insiders whispered about a purge within her team. Key staff let go, longtime allies quietly exiting. That doesn't sound like a temporary health issue. That sounds like a power shift. The fact that this change wasn't officially addressed only fueled the narrative. And when the palace goes silent, people talk louder. But then came the real kicker. Princess Anne's new title was an honorary. Her Majesty's Delegate is a position of seniority, one that signals trust at the highest level. And in the context of this ceremony, where every seat, step, and signal is choreographed down to the second, and stepping into Camilla's place was not just symbolic. It was structural. Behind the scenes, the pieces had already been moving. Reports suggested that Charles had been quietly orchestrating this transition for weeks, working with senior advisors and reshuffling internal staff. Not dramatic, but deliberate. And it wasn't just about Camilla. It was about setting a new tone for leadership, one based on reliability, not proximity to the throne. And there's no one more reliable than Anne. She's been called the hardest working royal for years, and for good reason. while others were dealing with tabloid scandals or PR spin, and was clocking in hundreds of public engagements with minimal fanfare and maximum consistency. No drama, no headlines, just duty. And in a monarchy that's been teetering between scandal and survival, duty has never looked more appealing. Even William and Catherine seemed to align with the shift. They didn't take center stage, but their presence during the ceremony was unmistakable. Silent support that didn't need commentary. Their positioning spoke volumes. This wasn't a rogue decision. This was the future of the firm, standing in formation. And then there was Prince Harry. No official comment. But shortly after the ceremony, a cryptic post appeared from an account long suspected to be linked to Harry's inner circle. It featured a throwback photo, young Harry with Aunton, accompanied by a short, enigmatic quote about truth in silence. Subtle, but not subtle. A quiet nod of support? Maybe. A veiled dig at Camilla's fading influence? Could be both. Either way, it added fuel to the growing sense that something major had shifted. Then came his own words. Not a flashy press release. Not a teary-eyed interview. Just a simple public statement that echoed the values she's embodied for decades. Service over spectacle. Work over ego. Stability over spin. And honestly, in this current royal climate, that hits harder than any coronation speech. Because while the headlines focus on Camilla's disappearance, the biggest story was what her presence represented. This wasn't just a role swap. This was a subtle coronation of a different kind, one rooted in legacy, not lineage. A power transition without a crown. For years, the monarchy has struggled with its public image, accusations of irrelevance, scandals that refuse to die, and a growing disconnect between the institution and the people it claims to represent. And with Charles now in power, there's been a tug-of-war over what kind of monarchy this should be. Should it cling to spectacle, or evolve into something more grounded? Enter N, the embodiment of grounded. The international response wasn't just curious, it was quietly approving. Commonwealth leaders reportedly welcomed the change as a sign of much-needed stability. Behind closed doors, there was a recognition that N's rise wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. A rejection of the tabloid chaos. A return to service. A quiet rebalancing of royal authority. And maybe that's why Camilla's absence stung so much. Not because people missed her, but because her silence confirmed the shift. There was no denial, no spin, just absence. And when a figure who once seemed central vanishes without explanation, the message is clear. Her influence is no longer essential. Of course, none of this means Camilla is officially out. Titles don't disappear overnight, and royal roles don't always match public appearances. But in the world of monarchy, symbolism is everything. And when Princess shows up with a new title, in a new role, standing exactly where Camilla once stood, it's not just a swap, it's a statement. It's also a sign of a different kind of leadership emerging, one that doesn't rely on pageantry or position, but on perceived legitimacy. Anne's rise proves that inheritance alone isn't enough anymore. What matters is consistency, credibility, and the ability to weather storms without becoming one. And that's exactly what she's done. Camilla's retreat, whether voluntary or enforced, highlights how fragile influence can be, especially when it's built on politics rather than permanence. And with Charles increasingly leaning on his quiet strength, the narrative has shifted from who's wearing the crown to who's holding up the institution. In the end, this wasn't a dramatic dethroning. It was something more insidious and more effective, a gradual sidelining cloaked in ceremony, a power play without a press release. And a clear sign that the future of the monarchy might not lie in who's next in line, but in who's always shown up. If you caught all that and still believe this family operates on tradition alone, think again. This was strategy, pure and simple. What did you think of this quiet power shift? Was it a smart move by Charles, or a sign of deeper fractures behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you're as fascinated by royal drama as we are, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of the messiest moments behind the palace walls. Of course, Camilla's absence wasn't just a one-day fluke. That kind of vanishing act, during that kind of ceremony, doesn't happen without layers of intent underneath it, especially not in the British royal family, where optics are the strategy and every nod, glance, and seating arrangement is practically a chess move. What's interesting isn't just that Princess Anne stepped in. It's that everyone around her fell into place like they expected it. No awkwardness, No visible scrambling. No, oh no, where's Camilla? Energy. Just quiet recalibration. Like this had been in the works for longer than we knew. The phrase Her Majesty's Delegate didn't just drop out of the blue either. That's a serious title, historically loaded, and never handed out casually. It signaled that and wasn't just standing in for a missing relative. She was officially operating on behalf of the Crown. And yes, we know Charles is a Crown. Which means, and was acting in his name. Not Camilla. That's not just optics. That's protocol. That's power. And let's not brush past that word, delegate. It's a title that gives someone authority. Trust. It means a monarch is saying, I choose this person to represent me. It's an enormous signal, and when it's bestowed on and not the Queen Consort, well, that's not just a plot twist. That's a whole new season. Behind closed palace doors, it's been reported that staff have been shifting too. Quietly, of course. Camilla's longtime aides? Gone. Senior advisors who helped shape her post-coronation image? Reassigned or pushed out. There hasn't been an official explanation, but the timing is too aligned to ignore. Camilla fades out of view, and suddenly is ascending, not as a replacement, but as a stabilizer. The monarchy's fallback plan, who's turning out to be the main plan. And this isn't some dramatic power grab on Anne's part. That's what makes it even more powerful. She didn't lobby for the spotlight. She didn't launch a charm offensive. She just showed up. Again, and again, and again. That quiet, relentless presence has become her trademark, and now it's a leverage. Because when you've spent decades doing the work without chasing the credit, you're the safest pair of hands the institution has. Anne's not flashy, but she's unshakable. She's endured family chaos, media storms, and more royal scandals than we can count. And she's done it all without once airing dirty laundry or slipping into tabloid territory. In royal terms, that's as rare as it gets. Compare that to Camilla's path, which has always been complicated. From scandalized beginnings to cautious public rehabilitation, she's walked a tightrope ever since marrying Charles. Yes, she weathered it. But did she ever fully win over the public? Not really. Her position has always carried an asterisk. And now that the monarchy is clearly trying to project an image of duty over drama, well, you can see how Camilla's role might no longer fit the narrative. So, is this a quiet retirement? A graceful sidelining? Or something a bit more pointed? We may never get a direct answer. That's the royal way. Change happens, but it's rarely explained. Instead, it's performed. Symbolized. Executed in silence. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. What's even more telling is the reaction from within the family. William and Catherine didn't just stand by. They leaned in. Their presence at the ceremony wasn't passive. They made it clear that they are backing this shift. The visual symmetry was unmistakable, and flanked by the future king and queen, forming a kind of unofficial triumvirate of duty, one that excluded Camilla entirely. And let's not forget the timing. With Charles stepping further into his reign, the palace knows it needs to solidify its image. Gone are the days of tolerating internal drama spilling into the press. This isn't about palace intrigue. It's about survival. The monarchy is under global scrutiny, and every move is dissected in real time, which is exactly why the institution seems to be pivoting toward figures who project steadiness, not spectacle, and doesn't give interviews. She doesn't leak stories. She doesn't pose for glossy magazine covers or drop cryptic comments. What she does is work. The kind of work that doesn't go viral but builds real credibility over time. And in this moment, that's a currency the royal family needs more than ever. And then there's Harry, always the wild card. That cryptic social media post, childhood photo, vague quote, it wasn't just nostalgia. It was a message. Subtle, sure, but also deliberate. In a family that rarely says anything directly, those silent nods speak volumes. Harry's connection to and has always been quietly strong, while the rest of the family tried to navigate around him, and was one of the few who maintained that bond. So his show of support wasn't random. It was calculated, and it added another layer to the unfolding power dynamics. Even the international response was telling. Commonwealth observers didn't flinch at the swap, they welcomed it. And, after all, has long-standing relationships across the global network. She's visited more countries on royal duty than most family members combined. Leaders know her. They trust her, and they see her as a symbol of continuity, something the monarchy desperately needs to project right now. Camilla, by contrast, has always felt more local, more wrapped in the Windsor bubble, and now that bubble seems to be shifting around her, closing in. The truth is, this wasn't just a ceremonial shakeup. This was a recalibration of influence, and that influence now clearly leans in a direction. It's the kind of change that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. But in the current royal climate, it almost feels inevitable. The family needs figures who can anchor it, not stir it. People with clean reputations, no tabloid baggage, and a proven history of loyalty to the institution itself, not just its current figurehead. And ticks every box. And it's not just that she's earned her place, it's that she's been there all along. In the background, on the job, out of the drama. And now, with the spotlight shifting her way, she's not changing a thing, which is exactly what makes the shift feel so stable. So what happens next? Does Camilla return, stage left, with a smiling photo op and a vague excuse? Maybe. But even if she does, the narrative has changed. The public has seen what a different kind of leadership looks like, one that doesn't need glitz or gossip. And in royal terms, that's the most powerful kind of leadership there is. Because when the palace wants to send a message, they don't tweet it. They perform it, in silence, through titles, seating charts, and who walks into the room first. And didn't take Camilla's place by accident. She was placed there, and that placement says more than any press release ever could. This was a torch-passing moment, executed with a kind of subtlety only the royal family can pull off. No fanfare, no throne room drama, just one very visible absence, and one very intentional presence. What's most fascinating about this entire shift is how quietly it happened. There was no crisis, no breaking news alert, no official palace statement. Just a woman who's been doing the work for 50 years stepping into a spot that suddenly had a vacancy, and everyone falling into line behind her. That's the brilliance of Princess Anne. She doesn't need to announce anything. Her presence is the announcement. And in a monarchy where perception is everything, and image is untouchable, she's never had a scandal. She's never needed a redemption arc. She's never tried to rebrand herself, while others were struggling to control narratives, and built hairs through sheer consistency. She's the royal you don't need to Google. You already know who she is, and what she stands for. Camilla, on the other hand, has always walked a delicate line. Her role in Charles' life, and her path to becoming queen consort, was one of the most heavily managed PR undertakings in royal history. And for a while, it worked. She softened her image, took on more public duties, and gradually stepped into the spotlight. But public approval doesn't always equal permanent influence. Because as soon as that spotlight dims, so does the illusion of power. That's what makes this recent shift so significant. It wasn't about drama. It was about durability. And when you stack Camilla's PR-driven rise against decades of silent service, there's really no contest. Charles knows this. That's why he's leaning on and now. Not because of personal preference, but because of institutional necessity. He understands that the crown needs to project something solid right now. Not glamour, not sentiment, stability, and it embodies that in every sense. The monarchy isn't what it used to be. Public trust is eroded. Scandals have piled up, and the future feels less guaranteed with every passing year. That's why Anne's quiet authority hits so hard. She represents what the crown used to mean, and maybe what it should mean again. And here's the wild part. She's doing it without even trying. No interviews, no memoirs, no tell-all specials. Just duty. That's it. That's her entire brand, and it's never been more valuable. The royal family has always operated on a mix of spectacle and strategy. But right now, the spectacle is turning sour. The public is tired of overexposed royals. They want substance. They want someone who shows up and shuts up. And that's exactly what Anne delivers. Her recent public statement, short, direct, focus on service, was a masterclass in leadership without ego. No dramatic phrasing. No veiled digs. Just a clear message. She's here to work, not to be seen. And somehow, that makes her more visible than anyone else. Contrast that with the silence around Camilla. Deafening, isn't it? No photos. No public reassurance. No explanation. Just absence. And when a senior royal disappears without context, it doesn't inspire curiosity. It invites suspicion. Illness? Maybe. But the restructuring behind the scenes suggests something more permanent. Something coordinated. And then there's that undercurrent of family politics. You think Charles made this move on a whim? Absolutely not. This was planned, discussed, strategized. It had to be. Because nothing about this institution happens by accident, not even who stands on the left side of podium. So Iffin was named Her Majesty's delegate. That wasn't just protocol. That was Charles sending a message. And what was that message? That Camilla's era of influence may be ending, and Anne's era of quiet authority is just beginning. This is a monarchy's attempt to reset itself, to remind the public what it can look like when it's not chasing headlines or burying scandals, to reclaim a sense of purpose that's been slowly bleeding out for years. Anne's not just filling a seat. She's anchoring a legacy. Even the younger royals seem to recognize it. Catherine's body language during the ceremony said it all. Deferential, steady, respectful. She didn't need to make a statement. She already made one just by standing beside and not in front of her. That kind of silent solidarity doesn't happen unless there's alignment behind the scenes. And William? Same deal. His presence next to and gave the whole event a kind of generational symmetry, like a passing of values, not just roles. It wasn't about who's next. It was about who's right now. So while Camilla may still hold the title of Queen Consort, it's clear who's commanding the real respect. Titles can be given, but authority? That's owned. Anne has spent her entire life owning it. This wasn't just a ceremony. This was a realignment. And it might just be the smartest move the royal family's made in a long, long time. So, if you're watching all this unfold and wondering where things go from here, same. Will Camilla reappear? Will and continue rising? Will this new trio of Charles, Anne, and William quietly reshape the monarchy's public face? Let's keep the conversation going. Drop your thoughts below. Tell us what you think this power shift really means. And of course, if you live for this kind of behind-the-curtain royal drama, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming next.